Alright, so I've had a request about how I did this suction thing, right? And this is quite a while ago I did it, so let me see if I can remember everything, and this will just be a quickie in trying to get you to be able to do the suction part of the cloth conveyor. Now, as far as this pickup, there's two things we didn't cover in part A. We didn't cover the pickup and we didn't cover the suction. So when we look at the animation, we can see that we got some green boxes which I've created, so I know where they are and I know where they are in the queue, right? And they're pretty well consistently always there, even with the randomization, say, of a tyFlow animation. So basically all I've done is keyframe this cylinder that's acting like an electromagnet and keyframed it manually to coincide with the movement of the boxes, come down, use a bind to pick it up, and then let go, and then re-keyframe for the second one. Now that part is fairly easy because it's fairly consistent where they are in the conveyors. So if we look at the tyFlow, and I'll just show the flow here, right? And we can see that we've got here just a bind, an object bind, alright, that's saying for the particles to bind to that magnet, and then I'm just keyframe them and release them as needed. So that's kind of the electromagnet part, is just if the magnet gets within a certain distance to the reject boxes, then we're going to send them out, do a bind, and just time the bind to release when it's over the reject funnel, the little tray that catches the rejects. So that's as simple as that whole reject section is done. Alright, so you can see all the red keyframes here. That's for this cylinder. This one is just attached to this so that it follows its keyframe animation, and you can see that we just keyframe it, follow in. When it gets within a certain distance, then the bind part of the tyFlow takes effect, which causes the box to connect with the electromagnet. Once the timing is set to be over this catch tray, then we release the bind. So that's the catching and releasing of the boxes. So let's look at how we did this funnel suction thing. Alright, so if we look in our layer menu here, I've got some items that are hidden. I've got path follow A, path follow B, and reject binds for your A and B, right? Now, there's a couple of tricky things. It's random when the boxes drop and exactly where they fall, but if we keep the shape of this reject chute reasonably tight, we can roughly predict within a frame or two where these boxes are going to land. So if, for example, we take the first reject, it pretty always ends up somewhere in here because I've controlled how the box comes down and where it lands, so I can try and pick it up. And then when the second one comes down, right, we can see that roughly, bounce makes it a bit random, but it's still roughly in the right place. So even though I haven't looked at this file in many, many months, you can see it's still working even though it's being recalculated, right? So there's a couple of tricky bits. The box here, even though it's soft cloth-like box, can get caught on this tube. So we need to make sure that our reject spline is exactly in the center of this tube. Then we also need to be sure that we flared it out like we have, and I've even put a ring here, like a circular extruded ring, so that it makes for a smooth edge to make sure the box sucks right in the center of this. So let's unhide the splines for a minute. So we go path follow A, and I think I just did an A and a B to make sure that I could time it and adjust it as needed, right? So that we got a path follow A, and then we got a reject sphere A. And we can see here that I've used path B there. See the spline that's highlighted now? And so see how this sphere is starting at the beginning of this spline, right? And then coming out here. So we're just doing a path follow on the sphere. And then we're doing a bind, a distance bind, like we did a distance bind up here on the magnet. We're doing that on the sphere, and you can now see that this sphere has connected itself with the soft body box has connected itself to the sphere, right? And the sphere is following the spline, and because I've set everything up to go right in the middle, and I've made the pipe smooth and the right size, you know, there is a chance that it can bind randomly somewhere, or it can try to penetrate the cylinder. So essentially what you want to do is just, you want a really smooth, long curve cylinder. Then you also want to make sure that the size of the cylinder is small enough to make it look like the box is totally compressed and being sucked through, but also large enough that at its smallest compression the soft body box does not penetrate the sides of the cylinder. So you can basically see how it's working here, right? The box comes down, it gets within a proximity distance to the sphere, which is similar to the test on the magnet. Then the binds, and you can adjust the number of binds. You also got to make sure the distance of your binds don't reach out too far, because if they reach out too far, they'll actually prevent the box from compressing enough. So you actually want a very short bind distance from the sphere to the box, and limit the number of connections allowed to be sure it's very tight there, right? And now you can see the sphere is following the spline path, the bind is holding, and it's not randomly attaching to anything along the way. And you can see the second one, I've actually used the same path for both. So if we turn off path A, and we just turn on the reject spline sphere 2, this is just a second sphere that's doing a path follow, right? And you can see the keyframes down the bottom here, and it's just a matter of playing around with the position of the sphere, the distance of the bind, and then hopefully everything gets sucked up, and you just play with that. You can see there was a slight penetration right here. I think there's a slight penetration of the soft body box through the pipe. I'm not sure that happened on my original, but you know, this is quite a few months later, and the thing is recalculated slightly differently. But you know, that's the basic principle of how I did the suction. It's a spline path that's set up exactly in the middle of everything. The pipe is just the right size. You can scale it up and down a little bit to meet your needs. Make sure it's got smooth edges. Make sure it's got a flare, so that, and that's really just to make sure that this box doesn't catch on all the edges, and then it wants to get caught there and not follow the path. And the size is appropriate for the compression of the box, and there's just a little bit of playing around with the timing. Exactly when is the timing that it comes down the chute, and where does it bind, right? You know, maybe you have to play with that a little bit, because there is going to be some randomness between every time you start the project on max. Like if I can keep this going, it'll roughly be the same every time until next time I start max. But there you go. I think I can hide this tube a little bit. Hide selection, right? And now you can see there's the spline path. You can see how it's bound to this pink sphere here, right? And following the path. And that's essentially how I did the suction, right? And if we go back in and look at the flow for a minute, the organized flow as best as I can, and you can just see the whole flow there, right? So that's basically how I did the magnetic pickup and how I did the vacuum suction tube. I hope that's helpful if you're one of the people that requested to get the information on that. Take it easy, everybody.